Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily for a Wednesday. It is Banjo Bowl week, and we count down to the big rematch between the Bombers and the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And now that we're into September, can look ahead to Winnipeg Jets training camp. Looking forward to having Murat join us coming up in about half an hour or so today on the program. And then we're going to talk some CFL. Rod Smith, who called the Labor Day Classic and has been calling CFL games all year long, is going to pop on in hour number 2. And we're going to finish it off with Nic Demski live on WST. And that's going to take us right into CFL 110, presented by Garage Living Winnipeg, which will debut live right after Winnipeg Sports Talk at 3:15 today. So welcome to everybody in chat. I hope that you'll be able to hang around and hang around with us after 3 p.m. for CFL 110 after that wild Labor Day weekend and setting up a big one, including the biggest home game of the year here in the PEG, the Banjo Bowl, which is live 2 p.m. on Saturday on CTV. It's going to be a great show, though. We also are getting ready for a big night. If you stuck around at the end of the show yesterday, we did a little marble race to determine our draft order, and tonight, the final day before NFL, it is draft day for the Winnipeg Media League. The marbles weren't kind to myself or Remis. We're picking 11th and 12th, but everything is possible in fantasy football. So we're going to have some good time with the fellas tonight, getting together to make some picks. We'll let you know how that goes tomorrow. But we're going to dive in. We got news from Bombers practice right off the top. As I mentioned, CFL 110 coming up after the program today. Brought to you by Garage Living Winnipeg. Also want to thank the sponsors that make WST possible for you. Of course, our friends at Coolbet Canada. We just did our final preseason lock shop because tomorrow we're going to be making CFL picks and getting ready for the Chiefs and Ravens. You can always check that at noon before WST over on the Edmonton Sports Talk channel. Of course, our friends at Princess Auto, Rollies Transfer, Manitoba Battery and Consolidated Supply, F Apparel, Wallace & Wallace, Canadian Club, Little Brown Jug, Royal Sports, Boston Pizza, the Winnipeg Jets, the Winnipeg Goldeyes, Aikens Lake, Assiniboia Downs, Breezy Bend, and we'll get into a why not question of the day for Not Autocorp over at Waverly and McGillivray. Let's get Michael Remis in here and get this going as we welcome everybody in chat. Remo, are you ready for the draft tonight?
Yeah, I'm deciding which jersey I should wear. I've got a bunch in the closet. Some I don't really wear jerseys. I like having them in my closet, but don't wear them. But I'm just deciding which to wear. We're all set for the draft. We got Wi-Fi, plugs, food, all the essentials. So I'm pumped. I had most points last year in the Media League, first in the regular season, but ran out of gas in the playoffs. I seem to get the worst matchups for all my play. I had Purdy and McCaffrey last year, Huss, and of course in the playoffs they're playing the Ravens, and that was the game where Purdy lost MVP. So remember that one. I'm pumped for NFL.
Just a quick note to all of you fantasy footballers out there and commissioners. Make sure you set your schedule so that your playoffs begin in week 15.
Oh.
And go week 15, week 16, week 17, and then the final week there's no games. I do know that traditionally a lot of teams have gone week 14, 15, and 16. Here's the thing. There are a bunch of top teams that actually have buys in week 14. I was amazed at going through the schedule and, kind of drafting and seeing the buy numbers by the teams. Like, it's not really something I usually pay that much attention to. There are some, big-time fantasy powerhouse teams on the buy in week 14. So, first of all, if you need to win that week to make the playoffs, and it's sort of like a playoff game, you might be screwed. So pay attention to that. But you definitely do not want to be setting up your fantasy playoffs to begin on week 14 when 4 or 6 teams have the bye. So there's a little tip for you commissioners right now, just making sure that you've got your schedules set up right away. And of course, tomorrow we'll be talking NFL. Chiefs and Ravens get going, and then Friday night is going to be real fun because we've got the Gold Eyes playoff game number 2 back at home. They get going tonight. Good luck to the Fish in the playoffs. Hopefully you can get that win, and it could be clinching time to move on to the next round on Friday. Of course, if the series goes to 3 games, there will be a game on Saturday night, and that could set up an amazing daily double for sports fans, starting it off at a sold-out Banjo Bowl and then heading downtown for a third and deciding game between Sioux Falls and Winnipeg. But that series starts tonight down in Sioux Falls. Good luck to the Fish, and Friday we'll be doing that, and of course keeping a keen eye on the Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles, who are kicking off in Brazil to start the season. But I think that the main focus on Winnipeg sports fans right now heading into this week is the Banjo Bowl, the rematch after the Bombers won 35-33 in Regina on the weekend. And Remis, this is such a huge opportunity for Winnipeg. We've talked plenty about the turnaround, winning 4 straight after being 2-6, and everything else that has happened around the West. They did it. They bailed themselves out. They are now in first place in the West based on a tiebreaker. But man, BC's got a really tough game in Montreal, and the Bombers get the Riders again. And if Montreal beats BC and the Bombers are able to beat Saskatchewan, the Bombers will have essentially a 2-game lead, or at least a 1.5-game lead, because with the Riders tie, they would be a 1.5 games back. And of course, BC, even though the teams have the same record right now, if they finish with the same record, Winnipeg will be ahead of them based on their season series. So with the goal being to finish first in the West and have the West final here, this is an absolutely massive weekend. Huge game for them to take care of their own business. An opportunity with BC having a really, really tough game. Because it's not getting any easier. These games at the start of the year that we laughed at probably when the Elks were 0-6 and 0-7, Edmonton is the real deal right now, and they're going to be a real tough out. They've got the most explosive offense in the entire Canadian Football League, and it almost doesn't matter whether it's Trey Ford or McLeod Bethel-Thompson playing. So the stakes are high for this one, and you know the Saskatchewan Roughriders are going to be doing everything they can to even the score after the Bombers and what they did to them in Regina on the weekend.
Yeah, I think home field advantage is going to be huge. You know it's going to be loud. You know, they tell you every time, Huss, that the crowd causes a delay of game penalty. I do like that as part of the game.
More than anywhere else in the Canadian Football League. That's why they're the loudest fans.
I do enjoy that, as part of the game experience. And I think, you've seen this year, home teams, won more often. I think it was up until a couple of weeks ago, there weren't that many road winners. And BC, I think they're a home team. They're a dome team. Now, they did win, it's technically, not in BC place. It was in Victoria on the weekend. But, I think everything came together for Nathan Rourke to finally have a bounce-back game. How is he going to do on the road against Montreal, who's coming off the bye, against that really impressive Thorpe defense? That's a big game. Friday, 6:30. Nice scheduling here this weekend, Huss, in Week 14. You have the 1-game Friday and the triple header Saturday, 12, 3, and 6. Or sorry, is the Bomber game now at 2?
Yeah, it's actually at 2.
That could have been
Just notice that
time.
There is going to be an overlap. There's going to be a 1-hour overlap between the Toronto-Ottawa game and Winnipeg-Saskatchewan, because Toronto, and Dusty's given me the lowdown as to why this is. The games are debuting on CTV for Saturdays now.
Yes.
So if you're planning on setting a PVR for the Banjo Bowl, it starts at 2 and it's on CTV. It is not on TSN. But apparently they have to play the game at 2, 3 Eastern, so that the game is finished and they are out in time for the CTV national news. So that's why Toronto-Ottawa will still be playing when the Bombers and Saskatchewan kick off. That's the only time so far this season that you'd have 2 games going on at the same time. But that's all good. Everyone in Winnipeg and Saskatchewan and the prairies and most of the country, I'm sure, will be focusing in on the Banjo Bowl if they're flicking around on Saturday afternoon. And I expect a number well in excess of 1 million people watching that football game. So it should be good. And hey, speaking of the Banjo Bowl and the Labor Day Classic, Dusty's doing the game this weekend. But Reem, I'm fired up to welcome in Rod Smith, who called the Labor Day game last weekend in Regina, to join us a little later on before Nic Demski jumps on the program.
Yeah, I mean, hey, this is like we're well in. I said, oh, you wanted to come on, Rod, to talk about the second half of the season. We're well in the second half. This is week 14.
We're 2/3 of the way through.
Yeah, the calendar has really flown by here, and he is calling. I know he's got Zoom calls this afternoon. He's calling BC Montreal on Friday. So, I mean, that could be a Grey Cup preview. Potential Grey Cup preview with Montreal. They've clinched a playoff spot already, and BC looking to turn the page here after getting their first win after Nathan Rourke returned. So Rod, he's been around the league for a long time. Great voice. Looking forward to having him back on the show and hearing his thoughts on calling the game on Sunday in Regina.
Yeah, listen, the more I think about it, and I know people are talking about it in chat, this BC Montreal game is huge. In that, Winnipeg has a trip to Montreal as well in their remaining 6 games. However, it's the final week of the regular season. And I think there's a high probability that Montreal will be finished and just getting ready for the East Final. And at that point, they'll have decisions as to whether they want to put Austin Mack out there and Cody Fajardo and the rest of their top players. BC is not going to get a break like that. They're going to go into Montreal playing a team off the bye. And as we mentioned, Remis, first place in the West, especially right now with all the teams being seemingly so close to each other, is going to be so huge. First of all, you skip the semifinal, and you don't have to play another very good team in the 2-3 game. But like we've said before, and we saw a couple years ago when Nathan Rourke was here, like, there are a lot of things that you can do in the comfort of the dome that you can't do in Princess Auto Stadium in the middle of November. And I have to think that if the Bombers want to get back to a 5th straight Grey Cup and kind of spoil the party in BC and be that team, they're going to need to win the division. It's going to be real tough to get on the road. And that's an advantage that I don't know if anybody else in the West can replicate. I think a lot of the data and the stats would say they can't. We'll see that crowd be impactful this weekend in the Banjo Bowl against Saskatchewan. But as they continue this quest for first place, this could be an absolutely pivotal week. But as we've said, and Michael Shea would be the first one to tell you, we're not paying attention to anybody else. We're minding our business, and as cliche as it sounds, we're looking to go 1-0 this week.
You look at the standings, Huss. The Bombers 4-2 at home, 2-4 on the road. BC 4-1 at home, 2-5 on the road. Home field advantage in the playoffs going to be absolutely huge, and I think the Bombers have a position to not only host a playoff game, but win the West after starting 0-4 when the panic button was definitely being pushed here early on in the season. Really, really impressive what they've done, and part of it is the defense. They're second in the league in points allowed. Montreal is first with the least. They have played one less game. But, I mean, the defense has really come on. The offense, some questions there. Mostly if Zach isn't there, how are they going to score points? But he's back practicing with the ones today, and I think they're still looking to find it for a full 60. You saw they were rolling along early last game, and then he got hurt, and then they kind of just, put it in neutral and just tried to run the clock out. We'll see how it goes on Saturday afternoon against Saskatchewan. But, all the talk about their great defense, hasn't really looked so great, and they're on a big losing streak here. They need to snap at us. Winless streak, because there was a tie in there. But I'm curious about how this rematch is going to go, and all eyes on Bombers practice and the injury report. Number one story is Zach. You're going to be talking a lot about the hit on CFL 110. And Jeff had a big rant on it yesterday, posted it on our X feed. but it seems like he's going to be okay, and we'll see if there's any, I don't know, retaliation or anything like that. I don't think so. I don't think anyone's going to do anything too stupid, but hey, it's a rivalry game. People get emotional. Stuff certainly happens, but big one for the West. Big week for the West Division coming up starting Friday.
Well, and of course, the Bombers are on the practice field today, and we've got some good news. Zach Collaros is out there, and he has taken first-team reps. All expectations are he will start the game on Saturday afternoon, and that is great news for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. He looked great for the most part in that first half before being knocked out on that very controversial hit that got a lot of people going, like Wade Miller after the game, and a hammer yesterday on the program. The other bit of great news, and I don't know whether we hadn't really heard that this was likely to happen, Remo, is that the offensive line getting a little bit of help. Now, it's not Stanley Bryant. He was not on the field. And imagine he's still recovering from, the sickness, the dehydration, everything that happened in the Hamilton game that surprisingly had him not make the trip to Regina. But Pat Neufeld is back and practicing at right guard. And Patty was obviously, before he left the lineup and missed the last few games, was really, really struggling with injury. If he comes back anywhere close to 100%, that is a big, big boost for a Bomber offensive line that has been performing valiantly without some of their key veterans. But, man, they could use Patty back. And he was built for games like the Banjo Bowl and the rivalry against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. That's going to be a very positive development for Winnipeg, and even more positive if Stanley, Big 66, is back on the Princess Auto Field helping protect Zach Collaros as well.
Yeah, Pat Neufeld, former CFL All-Star, having him back at full health would be big. Stanley Bryant as well, but they've played well in times where, hey, maybe you think they shouldn't. Randolph, he stepped up for sure this year at times. So sounds like they're getting some bodies. Big Hill, Jeff said this yesterday. It seems like he's going to be out more longer term, and you wonder what the future is for him. But nice to see Stanley Bryant back in uniform. One other player not practicing, Lucky Whitehead. He was injured in last game and then came back for that huge punt return. And the return game just hasn't been there this season after losing Janarian Grant. I thought Lucky's come in and definitely, he had the longest punt return of the year for them last game.
And you nailed it. That was a kind of a sneaky important play that I think maybe was missed, by a few. But I mean, it absolutely was a huge part of, the field position battle, putting them into field goal range, and allowing the Bombers to hang on by the skin of their teeth and escape with that 35-33 win. So we'll have some fun talking about just the environment, the scene out on the weekend, and setting up the Banjo Bowl with Rod Smith a little later on. And then we'll talk to Nic Demski before we dive in to CFL 110. So Murat is going to join us, and we'll talk some Jets, look ahead to training camp. We know now about the rookie camp, Remis. A week Friday, the rookies will get going. Friday, September 13th to Monday, September 16th, and then it's off to the Young Stars tournament. Do they still call it that in Penticton, the Young Stars tournament?
Yes, they do. Penticton, the Young Stars, September 13 to 16, 11th edition of the event. I remember when they had it, the Jets, when the Jets returned. So exciting stuff. We'll get to see players in uniforms. The Jets do play that evening, 6 p.m. and pretty exciting. I mean, the countdown is on us. Counting down to training camp. We're seeing players in uniforms, around the corner.
Are they not doing a rookie camp here in Winnipeg first before? So the tournament is the 13th to the 16th.
Yeah, I'm assuming they're going to come in next week and have a couple practices.
Yeah. That I'm sure they'll get the guys out to skate. They'll kind of get them do presumably testing, and some of those things will happen beforehand. So really, like a week today, a bunch of the young players will be here, getting ready to show what they can do, including Braden Yeager. I would assume Lambert, Chibrikov. Those guys will be able to come in, play a lot, play prominent roles. get their confidence up going into the big camp. Speaking of Chibrikov, he was involved in that, was it the Upper Deck NHLPA Rookie Showcase over the last day or so?
Yeah, so they bring all the players in. They're in near one of the Capitals practice facilities, get pictures of them for the Upper Deck Young Guns set. I think EA Sports getting some headshots. A lot of talk about Matvei Michkov being there, and I was curious, who's the Jets rookie? Connor Bedard's there. The Sharks, Celebrini and Will Smith are there, just doing media, getting promotional stuff done. I was like, who's the Jets guy going to be? Because I don't really think they have a big rookie this year, but it's Nikita Chibrikov. He's there, and he came into a game at the end of last year, got on the score sheet. But I wonder if they brought him in, to, here he is, with Ivan, is this Miroshnichenko? I forget who this was. Let me just double check. Yes, Ivan Miroshnichenko, here he is, interpreting. He's also helping out Michkov as well. So bringing some of the Russian players together. And I think you talk more with Murat later, but maybe he is a player who can make an impact at training camp, and get a call up at time. At time, he had a nice season with the Moose last year. He did get rewarded at the end. It's a guy who's kind of been off the radar. We talk about Lambert making an impact. You talk about Jaeger. We talk about Heinola. Haven't heard a lot Chibrikov, and maybe he sneaks in there.
Well, and I think part of the reason is that, he wasn't a first-round pick, and he's not a guy that I think projects to being, a top 6 player in the NHL, but he certainly has, a package that could come in and be a very important and effective player for a National Hockey League team like he was for the Manitoba Moose last year. And I'll just say this for a minute, Remis. We remember him coming here last year and staying here through the summer so he could work on his English. He really did seem committed to coming to North America and doing everything he could to put himself in the best position to succeed. And for players from overseas, especially Russians, in an organization without a lot of them, the ability to communicate is incredibly important. I can't say how impressive it is that this young man is there acting as an interpreter for some other players at this rookie showcase based on just how far he's come with his English over the last year and a half or whatever it's been.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting aspect of that. I don't know, maybe I was getting Santa Claus. I'm like, he's going to sign with the Flyers when he gets a chance so he can be teammates with Michkov. Is that the world that I'm in where I think every young player, I got to be honest, I don't believe a thing a player says anymore after Rutger. He's tainted all press conferences going forward, what he said about the
There's a few snake oil salesmen in the game. I think that is true. And in a lot of ways, I think teams and agents coach individuals to be, shall we say, less than honest with the media and the fans at times. But listen, there's a lot of great players and a lot of great individuals just in this organization, that I think have been, kind of on the other side of that. The Adam Lowrys, the Josh Morrisseys, and hopefully Braden Yeager. He certainly seemed that way when he joined us on the program a couple Fridays ago after being traded from the Winnipeg Jets. But anyways, Murat's going to join us in just a few minutes. CFL 110's coming up at 3:15. We'll look forward to bringing the hammer in for that. I do want to give a big thanks to our friends at Rolly's Transfer. As we get into the fall, if you have an upcoming move, limit the stress of the move with the white glove treatment from our friends at Rolly's Transfer, the most trusted name in moving in Manitoba. Family owned and operated for over 60 years. And of course, they're around the province every single day. They've got an extensive logistics business, which means for you and your family, flexible timing, flexible routes, and a great price on your next move from a company that has been trusted for into 7 decades now of getting Manitobans to their next stop. What you're going to want to do is go to Rollies.com. They've got a great website. It's just been relaunched recently. And if you click up in the top right corner, you'll see request an estimate. 2 things you're going to want to do. First and foremost, put in the promo code WST because our friends at Rollies have a special discount on moving services and moving supplies for WST listeners. You can let them know when and where you're moving. You can even upload pictures of furniture and boxes for them. They'll turn it around with a great an estimate for you and get you moving with the white glove Rollies treatment onto your next stop. For your next move, use the most trusted name in moving in Manitoba, Rollies Transfer. Check them out online and request a quote today at rollies.com. A huge thank you to our friends at Consolidated Supply who have been such wonderful supporters of ours for years. Of course, they are the leaders in irrigation systems and solutions, artificial turf, golf carts as the exclusive club car dealer in Manitoba, and other great options for your property, including hot tubs and amazing outdoor kitchens. Of course, they're also the leaders in small engine parts and repair. Pop by and see them open at their showroom, which is open to the public, 1395 Niagara Road East. And you can check out more on Consolidated Supply and everything they've got going on today at cte.ca. And hey, we're not ready to even start talking winter yet. There still is some nice weather and a full month of September into October to enjoy. So when you are hitting the trails on an ATV or going camping or getting back out in the boat, know that all your battery needs are covered with one trip or even a call to Manitoba Battery. And then when the winter comes and we're needing to take care of the cars and trucks, that's your number one stop as well. 2 locations, Logan Avenue and, of course, Dovercourt Drive, their new location in the south end of the city. The biggest and best selection of batteries in town with the best prices, period, beating the pants off the big box stores. You can count on that. You can also count on the best service in town because if you're busy and can't make it down to Manitoba Battery, no problem. They will deliver your batteries to you for free anywhere inside the perimeter on any purchase over $60. It's just that easy. Give them a call today, pop by in store, or shop online at manitobabattery.com. Keep it local and get the best deals in town. All right, lots of CFL talk in hour 2 of the program, but let's bring in Murat as we get closer to training camp and, of course, the Young Stars tournament in Penticton. What's going on? How are you?
Hey, Huss. Doing quite well. Happy to be back for round 2, post-vacation, getting into the swing of things.
I was just about to say, now that you've been back for a week or a bit, are you back into the groove or on the other side of Labor Day weekend? Does it feel like the structure of the season is just around the corner?
Yeah, for sure. Like there's a little while of getting back where sort of a lot of it's just catching up on information and everything that's gone on. And the Rucker-McGroarty thing sort of did end holidays early, but then there was a bit of a pause sort of getting myself together. And now I've got, that Cole Perfetti analysis piece. Where's that heading? What sort of numbers make sense? How does he fit in compared to past Jets at his age? And I got that up yesterday. So to have the conversations that come with it, the comment section, the Twitter stuff, like now it feels real. Now it feels like there's a season around the corner and Jets fans are ready for it.
Well, this has certainly been a topic that we've kicked around quite a bit this summer, and it has not, we don't have any clarity on it yet because he is still unsigned. And listen, just before we dive into that, I wanted to ask you about Nikita Chibrikov because Chibrikov was we're just showing a video of him acting as a translator for one of the other Russian players. And I have to just say how impressive that is, that this young guy who basically came here to try to really, dive into the team, the organization, and the culture is in a place where he can actually act as an interpreter. Very, very impressive. And he had a really, really good season last year. Interesting that he's at this event, Murat. But when you think about Nikita Chibrikov and his prospects for this year, what are the chances that he plays significant NHL games this year? And what do you think he would have to do to be in the mix in training camp to earn a spot?
Yeah, he's one of those guys, Nikita Chibrikov, who people sleep on, I think. There's a couple. Elias Salomonsson would be another one where unless you've been paying close attention to what he's been up to of late at the pro ranks, you might look at his draft slot and underestimate just how good this player is. I think Chibrikov is just like that, a player who's actually developed a more well-rounded pro game than you'd expect for a player of his age drafted where he was. One of the things that impresses me about him at the Moose level for sure, started at camp last year, and I'm sure he's done it his whole life, but really at camp for the Jets and then into his Moose season is where I picked up on it, is his plays getting pucks out and getting pucks in. He does a lot of little things that are pro-ready. Everybody talks about the shot. He has plenty of offense, and if it weren't for Brad Lambert, I think the hype train on Nikita Chibrikov would be even bigger coming out of his Moose season last year because he produced. But there are just pro elements where he'll eat a check to make sure a puck gets out or in. He's willing to make body position plays that put his teammates in better positions. There are just little things, I think, that contribute to him being an impact pro player. And then the question is, how ready is he for the NHL at that level? I think that even if you're, say, Brad Lambert, who's approaching with a lot of speed and a lot of hype, and even no matter who you are, the Winnipeg Jets are not necessarily going to offer the most opportunity to young players this year. I think the forward group is pretty deep and a lot of veterans are returning. So I'd be surprised if he carves his way into a half season, let's say, with the Winnipeg Jets. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes up and plays games and looks good when he does, sort of setting the table for next year being his real platform year. But all of that said, he's one of those players that's become a favorite for me because I like when guys do the little things at the blue line that, that's the stuff that shows up in the fantasy stats at the end of the day. It leads to offense for other players, and it's rare for somebody that young and that offensively minded and talented to probably have that in his game at the pro level, and I like that. I'm sort of almost pulling for that skill set to succeed.
Just listening to you talk about Chibrikov, it kind of gets me thinking about a bigger topic that I'm not sure we really have the answers to yet, Murat. And that is how Scott Arniel, as the new head coach, and his coaching staff are going to look at not just his young players, but all of his players, and what might be defining traits of particular guys that maybe put them ahead of others when it comes to competition for spots in camp.
Yeah, that's going to be one of our learning lessons, right? I tend to assume, and this would not be borne out necessarily by facts, but I tend to assume that coaches gravitate towards safe players and players who maybe represent the best of themselves when they were players. So I don't know if you've got insights into Scott Arniel's peak era, as a Winnipeg Jet, or even in other stops in his career in terms of what the best version of that player could be, but that's fun. The thing that I think about when a new coaching staff takes over also is that they have so much on their plate. And there may be systemic adjustments. We know that there's this summit that was meant to take place, and it should be wrapped up by now in terms of reevaluating what sort of data Winnipeg uses and sort of exploring all these other angles. And there's also the big rocks, the big priorities, like getting your aces in their places, making sure Mark Scheifele's scoring, making sure Kyle Connor's getting good opportunities, making sure Connor Hellebuyck's getting into a good rhythm, such that how does a team integrate its Nikita Chibrikovs? I wonder if that falls so far down the priority list for a guy who's sort of looking to make his mark on a lot of the bigger picture items and keep this a playoff competitive team and all that sort of stuff. And so I wonder if that puts it even more on the player than in other situations to prove that they don't cheat back checks. They do things that make coaches happy. They forecheck aggressively. They lay the body. They make space for their teammates and all that sort of stuff. It's a clean slate. It's a fresh start. And also the coaching staff has so many bigger fish on their mind that I just think that the onus is really on the player to take as much advantage of it as possible. That's the hot take. I don't know how it'll play out.
Well, and again, listen, Scott, he knows many of these players, and guys like Lambert and Chibrikov, I think might be in an advantageous position in this case as opposed to a brand new guy coming in that really didn't pay attention to the Moose last year, that wouldn't have connections, that wouldn't be talking about where those players are at, and of course wouldn't have seen them make their National Hockey League debuts in that final game where they both really, stood out and played a really solid brand of hockey. before the playoffs began, and they ended up going back to the Manitoba Moose. So those players will be, they'll have many eyes on them when we drop the puck at training camp, but maybe no one more so in the top 6 than Cole Perfetti and where he fits next year. But before we start talking about where he fits, is he going to be playing center? Is he going to be on the wing? Who his line mates are going to be? He's got to be assigned. He's got to have a contract with the Winnipeg Jets. And I mean, first off, before we even talk about where things are at, are you at all surprised that it's taken this long? He's certainly not the only one. I mean, we've seen some bigger names. I mean, Murat Sider's looking for a huge deal. Lucas Raymond. I mean, to name a few that aren't done. And historically, Murat, many of these deals get done right in and around training camp, and it just seems like we're on a very similar path for Cole.
Yeah, I'm sort of two minds there. The first one is you look at Winnipeg's own history, and I remember that year when both Patrick Laine and Kyle Connor needed new deals, and that wasn't until camp. You know, you get Josh Morrissey, Andrew Kopp, Neil Pionk, I think also later in summer. Maybe Pionk wasn't as late if my memory, but there's a lot of situations where it's been a September deal. And, you know, even those juggernaut contracts, that doesn't make sense, but those enormous contracts that Scheifele and Hellebuck signed last year on the eve of the season, I mean, that's a situation where, you know, Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Winnipeg Jets don't really mind when that deal gets done as long as they have confidence that it does. At the same time, like you point around the NHL at Cedar and Raymond and some of the other players, and I wonder if, you know, a common reason why things might drag is if there's, you know, some different contract expectations from players who have really blown up or had really massive step forward seasons or put together an awful lot of offense. And, you know, Cole Perfetti has a lot of strong underlying numbers. There's a lot of reasons to think that this is a top 6 producer, a lot of good arrows, a lot of good signs, but because of minutes, because of injuries, but most recently because of minutes, he doesn't have those enormous totals. And I'm thinking, like, shouldn't that be an easier deal to get done? Like, if you're leaning hard into it, if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff, like if you're having those conversations every single day, I would think that would be easier. And I think what's probably happening is just that they're not pounding at this table every single day because they're comfortable it will get done. That's my read of the situation, is that it will be sometime, you know, days, weeks from now. It will happen at or before camp. It won't be an extremely contentious situation between player and club, but I think part of that comfort is actually leading to the delay in terms of getting, you know, an obvious player to sign and part of the future, skating with Scheifele and Morrissey and Lowry. Like, this is a guy that's part of the culture, and I don't think anybody should be concerned about a McGroarty or a Skagsit or anything crazy. So, yeah, I think that it's just maybe so comfortable on, especially the Jets' perspective, that it's taking a bit of time.
Well, I think there's also something to be said for letting the rest of the market sort of develop, because I think for both sides, those comparables are important. I mean, for some of his contemporaries, and again, you know, he'll have different minutes played and games, but we've seen Lundell and Byfield take longer deals. And then maybe most interestingly is this deal that Seth Jarvis signed with the Carolina Hurricanes that you talk about in the piece. He got an 8-year extension. I don't know if you want to get into the novelty of the deferred money. I think, what is it? Almost $16 million is deferred money in signing bonuses, means it's actually paid out after the contract. And certainly I don't think most agents and players, they want the money now so they can do whatever they want with it. It was certainly a unique contract. I don't know that we'll see many others follow, but just quick thoughts on the Jarvis deal, the length of it, and, you know, what that might say for a potential deal longer than a 2-year bridge deal for Cole Perfetti if they and the Jets wanted to go down that route.
Yeah, first and foremost, credit to the Carolina Hurricanes for being creative. I think that's my biggest takeaway, just sort of league-wide, is, I don't know, I didn't even know this option existed prior to the Seth Jarvis contract. And I know that they tried it a little bit in a smaller fashion earlier in the year, but I didn't clock that. So the idea that you can give Seth Jarvis, you know, his salary every year, And then after the term of the contract has ended, years later, still receiving signing bonuses. So he's still getting paid, but that doesn't become part of the cap hit on this deal. That's creative. And
so hold on a second. So he's getting 7.42 an AAV, but the 15.67 million of that contract is actually not going to be as part of this deal. Like I don't really understand how the deferred money, like I get it, he's going to get it after the fact, but that still has to be charged on the cap at some point, right?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I should have read that before this. My understanding, and it's not a perfect understanding, so this could be inaccurate. I understand that money does get counted as part of the cap hit, but there's like a formula to reduce the value of it. So if it's 15.6 that you're saying, that not all of that will get added to the total value of the contract to go into the AAV formula. There'll be a discounted version of it, which does serve to lower the cap hit, even though he's getting all of that money later. So the idea is, like you said, we all want our money now instead of later. Well, I think the way that the formula works for this is also acknowledging that, saying that money later, you take less now and still be happy. And I think that works out in terms of how the calculation is made. It serves to reduce the cap hit, but I don't think the money disappears entirely. And I think I'd need to read it to be any more clear than that. I understand if that's sort of awkward speech on my part.
Listen, the fact that it's new and very rare, I don't know if anyone's got a full total grasp of it right now, but it certainly is unique. And I mean, Tulsky and the guys they've got working there are pretty creative thinkers, so credit them for doing it. We'll take away the nuances of the deal. How would Perfetti compare to Jarvis when it comes to, legitimately, making demands and falling in? Like, I think we all agree that he's probably going to be upwards of 6 if this number is beyond 6 years. And certainly if you're looking at a 7th or 8th year deal, which is prime time for those players, how do you compare Perfetti and Jarvis just from a hockey standpoint if you were arbitrating, if you will?
For sure. This is fascinating to me. This is a situation with a lot of angles, and I think anyone's final opinion just depends on what they prefer in a player. But you go back to junior, and the reason why Cole Perfetti was taken 3 spots above Seth Jarvis in the 2020 draft, like Cole Perfetti was offense in the bank. He had one of the most dominant second halves to his draft season in junior hockey. There was just a production level that Cole Perfetti had that Seth Jarvis didn't match. And I think that's true year over year throughout their junior-aged careers. So it justifies the draft spot, to be sure. It makes sense. They're both, quote-unquote, undersized players. They're both sub 6 feet and not particularly heavy players. And so for that reason, you have Perfetti ahead of Jarvis. And probably that specific thing that Cole Perfetti does well, that hockey IQ, where he makes reads on the ice faster than other players, even at the NHL level, and then he puts pucks into dangerous areas at the right time. Like, that leads to point production. And on a per minute basis, it leads to as much point production as Seth Jarvis has put together at the NHL level. So if he's as productive per minute, why is Seth Jarvis getting all this ice time? Why is he put together a platform year before this summer where he scored over 30 goals and 30 assists? He's just so productive, playing alongside Sebastian Aho in Carolina and just being so productive, like I say, getting all that opportunity. And so part of the pie is that Carolina has done a better job of integrating their young player alongside higher-end talent with more consistent minutes, with more minutes period, a little more grace, I would say, for when the player isn't producing. And then part of that, of course, would be Seth Jarvis's own qualities as a player. And it may be he's finding more use of his speed, which would be an advantage that he has over Cole Perfetti in the NHL. There might be a better translation in terms of his growth. He might be a late bloomer, and there's, the sky's the limit for the player as well. What's clear is that total minutes and total points-wise, Seth Jarvis came from behind Perfetti throughout their youth and, even into their beginning of the NHL time, and now he's surpassed them. And for me, I think that that leaves us room to criticize sort of the benchings, the lack of time. Even when Perfetti has scored 19 points in 21 games, I think it was, to start last season, he was still being pulled off the ice. Like, I don't think it is the most development-focused approach to the player, and Carolina deserves its credit there. But so does Seth Jarvis, and let's not eliminate that. All of that to say, though, it's fair that Seth Jarvis is making more money than Cole Perfetti on their next deal. I don't think Cole Perfetti's cap hit approaches $7.4 million, no matter what the length of it is.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you as well. And you know what? From Perfetti's standpoint, and the more I think about this, and I know there's a lot of people that say, no, this is just going to be a bet on yourself 2-year deal. I mean, you made a great point on the program before you went away that, you know, you can do that. But again, there's money being left on the table that probably will be made up later on, but there certainly is no guarantees. And if we look at where Cole Perfetti is right now, you know, going into this year, he's 22 years old. Like, an 8-year deal is a big commitment because it takes you on the other side of 30. And we talked a lot about this, like when Mark Scheifele was signing his contract and, you know, and Connor Hellebuck. Like, if I'm Perfetti's agent, I'm actually quite open to doing longer of a 2-year deal, but I don't think I'd want to get it to 8. Because a perfect time for a player like Cole, if he's going to get his money now, and, you know, say instead of 3.5, it's 6 right now, but it goes for 6 years. I think it serves a dual purpose, and the Winnipeg Jets are happy because they buy a couple years of unrestricted free agency. But for Perfetti, he gets to that point at 28 years old, which to me is a much more advantageous time to be potentially hitting the market or signing a long-term extension than if you're 30 years old in today's NHL. I don't think that's going to change over the course of the next 6 years.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because we're projecting and we're guessing. And I think that, like, my stance is that Cole Perfetti is likely to produce like a top 6 forward and a first unit power play player over the next several years. Like, I think that I see enough there, eye test wise, math wise. That's all in the piece. I think it's well laid out. I really recommend the read. I see that happening, and then it's a case of, well, how is this player type going to age? How is the timing of his market situation going to impact that next deal? One of the reasons why, if I'm advising Winnipeg right now, I'm at least saying be open to a long-term deal, is if Perfetti signs for 2 years right now, I think that he's entering a situation in the top 6 with power play time, and I really like his vision to produce with those guys, and there's a numerical argument for it as well. I think he's going to make you pay on that deal he signs when he's 24. So that's one element of timing that I think I would be advising, take that $6 million, make it for term. But then the question is how long. I think that reasons that Perfetti might age really well, and it's not a risk, is that when I look at players who, I mean, these are edge case examples, like, you know, Blake Wheeler to a certain degree, but let's go even more edge case than that, like a Lionel Messi, a LeBron James, a Tom Brady. Well, one of the things that, in addition to having bodies that aged well and the great care they took, is these were cerebral players. These were IQ players. They weren't necessarily were producing simply by bulldozing their way to certain situations. And so I'm like, okay, well, Perfetti ends up in good spots on the ice. I trust the aging version of him years down the line to put pucks in good spots. I don't think that skill set goes anywhere. It's a question of longevity based on, okay, we've seen him get injured a couple of times, and there's a question, you know, people will always have fears about his size. For me, it's foot speed, and I think he's approaching NHL average in that regard. Can he keep it there? Is there a risk of, you know, early 30s when that explosiveness goes away? Is he below average again? He's not getting into those spots. For me, the dial where I worry about his performance falling off isn't quite yet at 28. It's a little bit later. But if you're him trying to maximize money, that contract that you sign at 28, people are buying really productive years still. I don't know. I think I just thought out loud a whole bunch, but I don't know what the answer is, and hopefully there's still some value in thinking about it.
Well, one thing I'm quite sure of is I've heard some people suggest a 5-year deal. There's no way. I don't think the Winnipeg Jets do that. I mean, they're either doing 2 years and then crossing this bridge again, potentially, with arbitration in the mix, which is not something I think the team would want for a player or a prospect of Cole's level. But also, if you're going to be doing the extension, you want to be getting at least 2 years of unrestricted free agency. I think they might prefer 7 or 8 for obvious reasons. I think from the Perfetti camp, I still think about that number at 28 because, Murat, I'm sure you'll agree. I mean, players going to, regardless of what their numbers and what they've done at that point, it really does seem like the NHL, with the importance of younger players right now, views guys on the other side of 30 a little different than they would right in their prime at 28, 27. And obviously there are a few exceptions of players that are just legit superstars, of which I don't think Cole's close to being there yet. But I mean, to me, 6 or 7, if the Jets were making it happen, would be kind of that sweet spot that they'd want to get in. And from a Perfetti camp, I think you're looking at trying to go 5 or 6. And that's why, to me, a 6-year deal, if it's not 2, is what probably makes the most sense on both sides.
Yeah, you know what? I think the key thing to remember, too, is that I'm expecting Perfetti to be open to a long-term deal as well. Like, I think this is a player who's really, like, there's a story that I wrote last year about the bond that has formed between Scheifele and Perfetti and the mentorship there and things like that. And I'm certain that, as they're skating together this summer, that, there's a real sense that he's become part of, or could become as time goes by, part of that real core of, these Jets who the organization really prioritizes, the Lowrys, the Morrisseys, the Scheifele, the cultural fit there, I think, is really strong. And I think there's a lot to that. I think that the possibility of a long-term deal really depends on Winnipeg's willingness to expose themselves to risk of going with that higher AAV now. I think that that's really what that would sort of boil down to. I think if you're thinking down the line, you're buying his years from 28 to 33 someday later, you probably assume that that's quite a productive player still. And to your point about just the view on NHL players on the wrong side of 30, I think that's true, and I think that that's the trend. And I think that there's still so many cases of that being ignored. If you consider Winnipeg's own history with Blake Wheeler or Mark Scheifele, where probably they're going to be inefficient contracts as the player enters their mid-30s. Like, I think for the right people at the right tier, Winnipeg's still willing to run that risk. I don't know if it yet views Perfetti that way. In fact, I'm fairly confident they still want to wait and see and make sure that he puts together those end-of-season totals that he's probably capable of. And I think that's part of why there isn't an obvious long-term deal already signed.
One of the best parts of the piece over in The Athletic is looking at the other second contracts for some of the other Jet stars, including Mark Scheifele. Scheifele was 23 when he signed that 8-year extension that ended up being one of the best value contracts in the entire National Hockey League from a team perspective. Ehlers went 7 by 6 at 21 years old. Kyle Connor got 7 by 7.14 at 22. And what was really interesting, Murat, is just looking at how similar the 5-on-5 points per 60 are for Cole Perfetti compared to, these players that, are big-time stars on the Jets that ended up really getting paid for long-term.
Yeah, that's one thing. Whatever you think of the player type, whatever you think of the style of play, there are criticisms available to you based on size and speed. The guy has produced just like the previous generation of top-line caliber Winnipeg Jets forwards. And I think that gets lost. People look at the end-of-season point total, goal total, 19 goals. I think you fall short of 20 by, a few minutes of ice time. And you think, maybe he must not be as good as those guys were or as dangerous offensively. I think that the gap in public perception between what Cole Perfetti is capable of offensively, between public perception and what he is capable of, I think that gap is bigger right now than it may be at any point in the future, because I really see that ice time and opportunity coming this season under Scott Arniel with this particular Jets group. I see the production happening. I see some bumper spots for him on the power play. I see some first unit looks. Like, there's a lot of reasons that over the next few years, whether it's immediately or 2 years from now, this guy is going to put together the offensive end-of-year totals that everybody's hoping that he will. And because he hasn't, and that's a minutes and games played thing, and it's a minutes per night thing as well, I don't think perception is high enough. When you go points per minute, 5-on-5, he's up there with the Kyle Connors, Patrick Laine's, Nikolai Ehlers, and Mark Scheifele's, and that should be celebrated. There's an argument that, okay, well, you can sort of see, well, Laine had his shot. Obviously, that no one else has that. Connor had his hands at the speed that he moves at. Nobody else has that. Nikolai Ehlers can absolutely fly. No, like, you can point to these things where you're like, they felt like safer bets, perhaps, and maybe there's some trepidation about Perfetti as a result of that. I really think that hockey sense is just a little bit harder to name, and I think he's on track to be that top six productive forward, and he may not have done enough yet to earn a really big deal, and maybe that's to the Jets' advantage and credit in this situation, because I think he'll produce over the next several years of his life, if not on that level as those guys, close to it, and I think that's a good player to have in your top six.
What do you make of just his season last year? Because as they say, we look at all these underlying numbers, they're quite good. He had that great start. There's no getting around the fact that he absolutely did hit a wall and really struggled for a pretty extended stretch, though, in the second half of the year.
Yeah, I mean, all of those things are real. I think that, like, my memory of that first half of his season is a lot of point production, playing with a lot of good players, putting pucks into dangerous places. It was a really impressive thing. I remember thinking, okay, well, third periods, he's getting sat. Certain defensive leverage moments, he's getting sat. I thought that it was sort of a kid gloves approach, and I wondered how it would influence the player's confidence. I don't know if it did. I don't know if it didn't. I thought it was a bit gentle, but it made sense from a veteran coach who was taking one last swing at a Stanley Cup. He doesn't care about 2 or 3 or 4 years from now. He does because he's a good guy, but like his number one priority is on the moment in front of him. And I think that there were some win now decisions made, justifiably so, but with some costs there. And I think that Cole Perfetti's first half probably justified more minutes than he got. That second half collapse, yeah, you don't like that. You don't like to see that from the player. You don't like to see that production go away. Again, then you get into the flat-out benchings, and I think that'll hurt a young player's confidence as well. I think that the treatment was just volatile enough that I think all but the most stubborn and steadfast of young players would be affected by it. And also the slump was there, and you can make those arguments as well. The other thing that flies under the radar, and there's a commenter at The Athletic actually that shared it. I think Ian was his name. That amongst NHL players last year, Cole Perfetti got credited for some of the fewest secondary assists. Same with Gabriel Velarde, actually. He was one of the most productive primary points players, goals and primary assists. And there's a lot of reasons, there's a lot of indicators to believe that, the things that are most repeatable offensively, he did well. Again, so what do I make of his season? It was a mixed bag, but I really think the indicators are there that this is probably an impact offensive player, particularly if he plays with good ones alongside himself.
Well, speaking of playing with good players, another reason why I'm looking forward to training camp in particular is just seeing how things look and how things are different with Scott Arniel as the head coach. And I've been thinking about this and talking about with pals just when we're having a couple beers and kicking around Jets topics. Do you see a fit potentially with Mark Scheifele at some point for Cole Perfetti?
Hey, I kind of do. On paper, I do. And Mark Scheifele is a line mate that Cole Perfetti has had, right? If you go back a season and a half or so, there was that Perfetti-Scheifele-Wheeler line that was actually quite productive for a short stretch there. There was some things to like about those two players in working together. There's a hockey sense sort of timing play, protect the puck, put the puck into the middle, that you can see that developing. If you do play Scheifele and Perfetti alongside each other, you hope that you've signed him long-term because those point totals are likely to explode. Like that's that's a situation where his end of season numbers, if he plays a lot with Scheifele, now you're looking at that, that, I don't know, 25 goal, 35 assist type of season if you get consistent minutes alongside a player like Mark Scheifele. So that would be productive, and it would be a concern for whatever contract he signs next if you're the Winnipeg Jets. I think just based off of, I'm sure Mark Scheifele would be delighted to play with Cole Perfetti, but when I talked to Mark Scheifele about his playing style and about playing styles that he liked last year, he really lit up, always when talking about Kyle Connor, we know that, but Gabriel Velarde as well. And I think that Connor, Scheifele, Velarde line, which did get beaten badly in terms of 5-on-5 metrics because the back checking wasn't there, there were some assignments missed, the goals against were higher than you'd like. I don't know that we've seen the last of it. And that will be one of the challenges for Scott Arniel, especially coming out of this analytics summit, being like, hey, wait a second. On paper, these guys are a great fit, but when we play them together, we don't outscore other teams, especially not like a first line should. How much are we willing to lean into this? And if they're not, then Cole Perfetti becomes, a viable bump up to that top line spot, especially if Arniel takes a modern approach and looks at more of a productive top 9 than a top 6 plus checking line type of utilization.
Well, for sure. And I mean, listen, I get it. Bones been around for a long time. He had the guys that he liked playing together with. And I'd be surprised if there wasn't, some maneuvering inside the dressing room, if you will, of guys that have sort of really expressed, I really like to play. I mean, we've heard it from Mark a million times, and we've been talking about Ehlers and Connor, about just how much he likes playing, with Kyle, how comfortable he is. And, obviously they've been great offensively, but you can't ignore what hadn't been happening often enough. And that was, having a good enough goal differential, to your point, to, justify being that first line that gets so much time because of what they were giving up as well. And I would love to see through the preseason and even earlier on this year, giving a few different looks, to those lines, because as you mentioned, if you're thinking top 9, but especially balancing out that top 6, there's definitely an argument, and you'd probably be better off to do this with a long-term deal signed for Cole Perfetti, because I really do think that if he played with a Mark Scheifele and got even close to the minutes that usually are associated with Scheifele's line, playing with a player like that and whoever else is on that wing, we could be talking about a guy that takes another significant jump up in production.
100%. I mean, one of the great advantages to playing alongside Mark Scheifele for just about any Winnipeg Jet is that you're getting big minutes and good offensive situations, and you've got a guy that makes plays like Mark Scheifele does, opening up space and putting pucks onto your stick at dangerous times. I think that most players, and Cole Perfetti, probably I could see that happening. I would love to go back and look at the numbers when they played together for that stint, especially with Wheeler. I think that they were productive. My memory says that they were. Nikolai Ehlers is another guy that whenever he and Scheifele play together, Winnipeg outscores their opponents by a ton. And it's a situation where I guess if you're looking for ways to sort of exploit the skill sets that you have, and you're a new coach, you sort of need to balance the idea that you want everyone on board. You need your big guns to really buy in and really have an enormous, you need to be pulling on the same rope as your big guns. And also, you probably want to put your stamp on things too by saying, hey, I've got these ideas and there's some new routes that we want to try. You're not just going to do what the previous regime did, even though you were part of it. I don't think any NHL hockey coach would do that. They all have ideas for what makes teams good, and they're going to be tweaks. Just get them on the ice. I'm talking it through. I just want to see it now.
Yeah, I'm with you. Listen, it's going to be a real fun camp. Again, the Young Stars tournament is going from the 16th to the 13th in Penticton. Imagine the rookies will get here a day or two before that and then fly out. And then main camp the following week, heading into Winnipeg Jets Fan Fest on the morning of Saturday the 21st. And the first preseason game that night at Canada Life Centre. We're now getting down to the days until training camp and just a few weeks until we get going next month in the National Hockey League. Murat, great read. Folks, get there to The Athletic and check it out. The title, again, is all about Cole Perfetti, projecting where the Jets and Perfetti will land on a new contract. Some great analysis and comparison. Murat, great to have you back on the program. Enjoy these final few days before things get real busy coming up here in Winnipeg. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Huss.
Good stuff. There's Murat Atesh. Great hockey conversation. Cannot wait for Jets season here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. We're going to be talking to Bombers coming up. Rod Smith's going to join us in a few minutes. And then Nic Demski will as well, heading into CFL 110. Of course, all our Bomber reports are brought to you by Princess Auto, proud sponsors of the Bombers. And the home of the Bombers, Princess Auto Stadium, the biggest party of the year. And that's saying something at Princess Auto Stadium is going to be on Saturday afternoon. The sold-out Banjo Bowl pregame gets going at noon before the 2 o'clock kickoff. Actually, I think they might even be opening it up a bit earlier. If you're headed to the game, get to the Princess Auto tailgate zone. Get a couple beers in you, $5, a couple hot dogs in you, $3.50 along with pop, inflatables for the kids, entertainment, and it should be a zoo there of both blue and green. No better day of the year at Princess Auto Stadium than the Banjo Bowl. Of course, Princess Auto, headquartered and founded right here in Winnipeg with 2 locations to serve you, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. And you can, as always, shop online 24/7, 365 for all the great deals at Princess Auto, online at princessauto.com. And they better have a lot of Canadian Club on Saturday. I will tell you that. The Bomber fans have been having a great time at the games this year and have been taxing the staff of the bartending locations throughout Princess Auto Stadium. Of course, Canadian Club is the official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And not only will the Canadian Club be flowing in the north end and throughout the stadium, you can also get the great taste of Canadian Club with ginger ale. Pre-mixed cocktails in cans available throughout the stadium. And it's also available wherever you buy your beer. Check out for Canadian Club and ginger ale in cans at your local beer store. And, of course, the entire Canadian Club family waiting for you for the weekend in the Banjo Bowl at your local Manitoba liquor marts. Certainly, I think you'd be having more fun on Saturday afternoon at the Banjo Bowl than building a new fence. If you do need to get a new fence up before winter, just give the experts at Wallace & Wallace a call. They've been doing it since 1946 as the leaders in fencing and overhead doors. If you need the security and protection of a new fence, they've got you covered with vinyl, ornamental, welded wire, chain link, or wood fences. And if you do have a need for a new garage door, make sure to talk to Wallace & Wallace. They've got the largest selection of overhead garage doors in Winnipeg. Certainly have the perfect match for your home, and that can add value to your home as well. Give them a call at 452-2700. The Wallace & Wallace team will arrange a time to come out and give you a free estimate. You can also visit them at wallacefences.com or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Crescent off of Kenniston. And hey, as we get into fall, which is just around the corner, guys, if you're looking into your closet and realize that you need to step up your menswear game, get on down and see our pals at F Apparel at 190 Smith Street. They've got custom suits beginning at just $400, along with chinos and golf pants, amazing shirts, custom shirts made to fit, both tucked and untucked styles, and the biggest and best selection of menswear accessories in town. If you're getting married next year or you're in a wedding party, make sure to talk to the guys at F about a 15% discount when the wedding party gets their suits at F Apparel, suits that you can look amazing on the big day and then wear well beyond the nuptials. F Apparel's at 190 Smith Street. Make an appointment for a fitting and find out more online at that's EPH, apparel.com. All right, let's get Remis back in here. Man, that was a fun conversation with Murat, just getting me more amped up to get going for training camp when the Jets get back to town, and even for the Young Stars tournament.
Yeah, a lot of questions about Cole Perfetti this season. He was healthy scratch for a number of games last year, but at times was among the Jets' scoring leaders. And what kind of step forward is he going to take? And his contract, what's it going to be? He's currently unsigned. Will we have a holdout? And is he going to sign a long-term? You look at some of the comparable contracts signed this offseason. Guys, from his draft class, you mentioned Seth Jarvis. What is his contract going to look like? And just going by who his agent is, Kurt Overhart, and the challenges the Jets have had signing some of his players to deals, taking Andrew Kopp to arbitration, Jacob Trouba holding out. I do think you're more likely to go for a bridge deal. Maybe he tries to cash in after. It'll be fascinating how this shakes out, but that seemed to be the one contract issue facing the Jets. I guess that and Nikolai Ehlers, if he's entering the final year of his deal. Do we have a Thanksgiving Day extension announcement? I'm going to have to Google what day that is, make sure I'm available. I don't want to have any important family plans on Thanksgiving because there could be a contract signing if things go like they did last year. Obviously, I'm making reference to last year.
If they sign Perfetti, I'll go back to Grand Forks and record another video in the Target produce section like last year when when Hellebuck and Scheifele got the extensions.
Just be careful when you say, if they do this, I will do this on the internet, because people will hold you to that. Hassan, just because you think something is unlikely to happen doesn't mean that it won't happen. But yeah, we will need, if there is a long term.
I can hit the Chick-fil-A and pull that off, and it won't be a big deal. Much unlike some other outlandish and outrageous claims on the internet that have not been followed through in recent discourse in the last few days involving college football. I will just leave it at that. We're going to talk to the big guy, Rod Smith, on some CFL football coming up in just a second. Rod, of course, was in Regina, as many of us were, in that incredible atmosphere at Mosaic Stadium, watching one hell of a football game. And that was just the first half of this incredible rivalry, because the teams are back at it in the Banjo Bowl Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m. here in Winnipeg, and coast to coast on CTV. Let's welcome in our pal Rod Smith from TSN. Rod, it is great to have you back on Winnipeg Sports Talk. How was your weekend in Regina? Hold on a sec, Rod. I think we've just got you muted here. We just got to, is that on our end, Reem?
I'm trying to request. I think it should be good now. How about now, Rod?
Perfect. Rod, what's going on? How's the weekend in Regina?
Really outstanding. I've done a lot of games in Regina. I've done a lot of Bomber Rider games. I'd never done a Labor Day game, and so that was a treat for me, because it had like just a little mini Grey Cup kind of buzz, and I'm sure Banjo Bowl will have that too. Like around, in downtown Regina, it's a lot of Bomber jerseys, a lot of Rider jerseys, and I love that. I love the rivalry. I mean, there are good ones. I mean, that one is said to be the best, and I can't really dispute it. The way fans were out for this thing, the way they filled Mosaic Stadium. A genuine playful hate, if you will, for the two, the two franchises, stable franchises in the Canadian Football League, and it was neat to see it under those circumstances. And I'll tell you, the game really delivered too. I mean, it was exciting right until the end.
Well, it was, and just to echo your thoughts, I mean, it had been a couple years since I'd been back, and we did a tour with about 55 people. I mean, I think there was in total probably a good dozen plus buses that came down with Bomber fans. I mean, and they were everywhere. And, if you were out in some of the bars on a Saturday night, I mean, it was just, there's nothing like it. It is sort of a mini Grey Cup. And to me, it's the most fun weekend of the year in the Canadian Football League outside of the Grey Cup. And there's no better place to spend it in Regina because of the fun rivalry between the two clubs, and people really do get together for the most part. I was amazed. I know we saw that one scrap on social media, which blew me away because I did not even hear anything remotely close. And I think part of the reason why some of the chirping was maybe down, because I'm not sure either team was going in, or either fan base, with the utmost confidence. I mean, you knew the Bombers were going in to play a very good team that had been struggling in a tough spot. And the Riders, for their part, had this great start, should have won a few of these games, but the fact of the matter, they hadn't in. And, in some ways, it was sort of a nervous group, but we did not see the nerves, I thought, from the teams, especially in the first half. I mean, for everyone thought that this was going to be an easy under and the first team to 20 would win. We certainly saw that narrative flipped in the first half, because there was some great offense on both sides.
Yeah, there really was. And you thought about, both of these teams and what they've gone through so far this season. I I mean, the Bombers started at 0-4. The Riders started at 4-0. And at that point in time, if you could have told me, well, by the time they meet on Labor Day, it's going to be for first place. Not only is it going to be for first place, but they'll be like only a point apart of the standings. I would have thought you were crazy. But, here we are. And once again, this Banjo Bowl, it's the same thing. Just flip it. Now Saskatchewan's a point behind Winnipeg. And, we'll see. It's close. And I can't recall. Apparently, it's just over 20 years ago, the last time we headed into Labor Day, where no team in the West was above 500. That's just crazy. Three teams in the East above 500, no teams in the West. I mean, a long, long time since you could see something like that. So I can see both of these teams, the Bombers nicely bouncing back from a really tough start, but the Riders, I mean, really wondering after going 5-1 and now sitting below 500. It's a really interesting dynamic and not over yet. Looking forward to the game in Winnipeg as well.
Well, and to be honest, I mean, I don't think, part of the reason why neither fan base went into that game overconfident at all, and I don't think should be the case on the weekend, is that like Saskatchewan, and maybe everything is just settling where it should be, and all these teams are really close. I mean, I would make that argument that is where we're at right now, and why we're going to have such an incredible final third of the regular season that we really haven't had in the West for a number of years. But when I look at the Riders, 6 games without winning a football game, they could have easily won that game on Sunday. Both games against Montreal, you could argue that they should have won. I mean, the one that they lost at home where Lowther missed the 4 kicks and the one got returned for a touchdown was honestly one of the most well-played quarterbacking games all year. Trevor Harris was phenomenal in that game, and yet they sort of found a way to lose. And that's what the Bombers were doing earlier on this season. BC had been doing a lot of that lately, and now all of a sudden Edmonton's come out of the ashes. And we've got 2 wins separating first from last in the West. The one thing I think we can guarantee, every game is going to be huge for the rest of the way if you're a Western Division team, and it is going to come right down to the finish line.
Yeah, it will. And a key for Winnipeg, they won the season series against BC. That's big, especially the last 2 games they played. Both wins where their defense was absolutely dominant. The only but with the Lions is, so they bring Matthew Betts back in. That'll help their pass rush. But Nathan Rourke, that was his first game. He clearly was not as sharp as we saw in 22. He's progressively looked better. So, if they're to meet again in a West final again, how different would it be this time around, especially depending on where the game is? I mean, obviously advantage Winnipeg right now because they have the season series. And big advantage Winnipeg as far as the Riders are concerned. If the Bombers beat them in the Banjo Bowl, then they've won that season series as well. So they have these tiebreakers, and when things are that close in the West Division, if that continues down the way, huge for Winnipeg right now. But, and not to change the subject of what you're talking about, I mean, how is that Collaros doing? How is Adam Bighill doing right now? They did win the game, but a couple of key losses on the field.
Well, for sure. And there's good news and bad news. The good news is that Zach is back at practice today, leading the ones, and they expect him to play.
Right.
There's serious concern that Adam Bighill is going to be out a considerable amount of time, and worries that maybe depending on his plans after the season that could be it for Adam Bighill. I mean, that guy's such a warrior. He'll do everything he can, like he did last year, to get back on the field.
Yeah,
we wish him well. I will say this though: this Bomber defense, which has frankly been a revelation, Rod. I mean, we went in with all the money that they had to spend, put to Dalton Schoen, put to Brady Oliveira. The thought going into the year was that, well, the Bombers' offense is still going to be elite, but they're going to probably need to be winning 40-35 sometimes because of the changes on defense. Couldn't have been more reversed. The offense has really struggled at times throughout the season, although they sure looked good when Zach was coming in the first half against Saskatchewan. It has been the defense that put the team on their back for about a month coming out of the 2-6 loss, and we know how important defense is come playoff time in the Canadian Football League.
Yeah, and I look at the secondary in particular, although they've had to, Jackson Jeffcoat retires. They had to make, changes up front too. And some additions have worked out really well there. Linebacking core, Tony Jones filling in for the injured Kyrie Wilson. Impressed with the play of Jones so far. And the way Shane Gauthier has also filled in for Bighill when he's had to as well. Retta Cramdy at the Sam linebacker spot. But I look at the secondary. Biggest question, I remember the opener in Winnipeg against Montreal, and my biggest question was in the secondary on the corner with DeMario Houston leaving, They have two new corners in Tyrell Ford and Terrell Bonds, and they had a rougher one against the Alouettes in that opener. But that secondary has steadily gotten better, and those two corners, in particular, look at the play of Ford. I mean, it's been nice the way they've gelled in, along with, of course, Brandon Alexander at safety and Evan Holm, who might be an underrated star in the Canadian Football League, and Dietrich Nichols as well. So, I mean, I think their secondary is a lot better now too. And you're right, that defense has really stood up well.
Well, and just looking ahead to this week, I mean, to your point, we have been following every single game over the course of the last month, and literally every single thing has broken the Bombers' way since they were 2-6. Saskatchewan hasn't been winning. BC hadn't been winning. Edmonton was winning, but at the expense of those other teams to bring everybody back into it. And we were just talking earlier about this BC-Montreal game. And, knowing how close it's going to be and the potential of tiebreakers, Rod, Montreal coming off the bye, hosting BC on that cross-country flight.
Yeah.
If Montreal can beat BC and the Bombers get the win at home against Saskatchewan, they essentially have a 2-game lead on both of those teams.
Yes.
Because Saskatchewan would be a game and a half back. The season series won't really matter with Winnipeg and Saskatchewan because Saskatchewan has the tie. But they would be more than a full game back. And BC would be a game back. And even if they got it on the Bombers would still have the tiebreaker. What's key about this is the Bombers go to Montreal as well, but in the last week of the regular season. I think the way things are looking right now, there's a high probability that the Alouettes will be home and cooled and might not want to play their starters in that last game.
Right.
So for BC, this is a massive game to build off the good vibes of the Touchdown Pacific game and keep up with the Bombers. And listen, the Bombers just have to take care of business at home because that home and home coming up against Edmonton, bets are off now when we're talking about the Elks.
Absolutely. The way Edmonton's going right now, and look at so Edmonton's won 4 of their last 5, after losing 7 straight to start. And that one loss was in Montreal a couple of weeks ago where Boris Beattie kind of let them down. I mean, they were in a chance to win that game. And their kicking game led them down, but they had the lead in that one in the second half, and Montreal came back, and that's no easy place for a visiting team to win. So Edmonton is just a better team. We saw that against Calgary on Monday. I mean, they're a bit of a wild card now. I don't know what to think of the Elks. I mean, despite their record, as long as they can get into the playoffs, I mean, they could do some damage. I wouldn't take anything for granted against them anymore. And they, by the way, in their 0-7 start, had a lot of near misses too. They lost back-to-back games on the road in Toronto and BC within less than a week on walk-off field goals. I mean, they were that close so many different times and just couldn't seal the deal. So that's a good football team. And they have 2 quarterbacks that can make it happen. I mean, for all the talk about Trey Ford, the way McLeod's been, especially since Trey Ford got hurt, has looked dynamite. So, I mean, that one, you're right about that. I mean, but I agree with you about BC and Montreal as well. Absolutely huge. The Lions lost in Toronto. They lost a close one in Ottawa. I'm just talking about jumping those time zones, but they did win in Hamilton, although at a time when the Ticats looked absolutely in disarray. So that's a tough one for BC. But Nathan Rourke, you got to admit, does look a whole lot better with each game he is playing. And William Stanback, I'm sure, is going to be fired up going up against his old team back in Montreal, coming off his best game of the season.
Well, listen, I mean, I have no doubt that Nathan Rourke and the BC offense is going to get theirs. The big question for me when they go to Montreal is, can they mix in a few stops? I mean, I know they did it against Ottawa. Ottawa was missing their top 2 receivers. They had the crazy travel all the way to the West Coast.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, if BC can go in and beat the Montreal Alouettes, that will be the statement game that they are back, that 4-game losing streak is behind them, and they're poised to continue what they set out to do at the beginning of the season, which was have the West Final at BC Place and then play there the following week in the Grey Cup. So, a huge start. I have to ask you about Ottawa. All year long, people have looked at their record and said, oh, yeah, well, whatever, and just not really given them the credit that I think they've deserved by what they had earned. And then we saw a really tough game last weekend. And again, we said they were missing a couple receivers. How dangerous do you think the Ottawa Redblacks are, given, their quarterback situation? If Drew Brown is back in there, and are they the biggest threat in the East to the Alouettes? Or is it the Argos, although we didn't, obviously they lost to Hamilton, but that's a game. You throw the records out every year. I mean, that's Labor Day, a lot like the Saskatchewan Bombers. I mean, you've seen a lot of the East, Rod. I mean, what do you make of Ottawa, and who is the biggest challenger to the Alouettes to maybe do what the Alouettes did to the Argos last year when it was the Argos and then everybody else?
Well, it's a great question, and it's very timely, too, because of who Ottawa plays this week, and that's the Argos. Ottawa had one game against Montreal, and they were blown out. It was their worst game, worse than the game in Victoria. They were never in it. They fell behind like 30-1 in the first half. So that was really, let's wait and see. Now, since then, they've won games, including a game over Hamilton, which was a walk-off field goal at the end. One the Ticats thought they had. The Ticats, I think, was back in week 3, and they would look like the winning touchdown pass thrown by Bo Levi Mitchell in the final minute. They left just a bit of time on the clock, just enough for the Red Blacks to get back and close enough for Lewis Ward. So Ottawa won that game. And I bring up Hamilton and Montreal because they're East Division teams. Last year, the Ottawa Red Blacks did not beat an East Division opponent. And they've hardly faced East Division opponents this year. They have only faced Montreal, the loss, Hamilton, the walk-off win. So that's it. And now they're going to have a whole lot of East, in the final third of the season, beginning with the Toronto Argonauts coming off a loss in Hamilton, but still looking respectable as they did the week before against Saskatchewan when they won with, Chad Kelly back at quarterback. But there are a lot of other aspects to consider about the Argos too. And I still think I wonder about Ottawa. I want to see Ottawa at home against the Argos. I want to see how the Red Blacks handle coming off a loss up against an East Division opponent, and they got to win those games within the division. They're 1-1. That's a huge game to me. An absolutely huge game for the Red Blacks and the confidence that people should have in them to see how they do against the Argonauts.
It's funny you mentioned, their wins because with it being so close, I often like to look at just the point differential from teams just to show how their strength of victories or where they've been. I mean, the West is so tight. I mean, the Bombers are plus 16, and it's 6-6. BC's 6-6. They're plus 4. The Riders are plus 8. And then Calgary and Edmonton. Edmonton has the best point differential in the West.
Crazy.
They're plus
Just
22.
crazy. Yeah.
Obviously, Montreal's been smashing everyone. They're clearly the best team in the league. But Ottawa is 7-3-1 and has a negative 10-point differential.
It's crazy.
Which shows you that they've won some nail biters and then got whooped a couple times. And I am with you. I think this is the test. And this game in particular, I think, is going to set the tone for the final third of this season for Bob Dice's team. I mean, we love Bobby Dice here. Great Winnipeg guy. And he's a great leader of men. And I think he's gotten a lot out of that. But, man, if they have injury troubles, they're playing against some good teams. And you know that the Argos are looking at this as a game that they have to have when they head to the nation's capital.
Yeah, they've been on the right side of these close games this year, and they were on the wrong side. And they had a lot of close games. Talk about Edmonton before, but Ottawa was losing games like that a year ago, 2 years ago. But they had walk-off wins. Let's see if I have this right. They had a dramatic victory over the Bombers in Ottawa after the weather delay. They had the walk-off win over Hamilton. They had a walk-off win in Edmonton. They had a walk-off win in Calgary. These are all 1-2 point victories, to your point. They have had very close games. They've been on the winning side, and they're a good football team. Don't get me wrong. They are. They look like a team that they're finding their way. And they had that tie at home against Saskatchewan in that crazy finish. So they are, no question, a contender. Exactly as said. How much better are they? You have that stat about points. I know sometimes it just doesn't seem to add up. So I feel I need to see a little bit more from Ottawa, and even from Drew Brown, who I think is a really good young quarterback, showed that when he got his chance in Winnipeg. And I think he's been a great addition, the best quarterbacking that they've had overall consistently since Trevor Harris in 2018. So, but as said, I'm very curious as to what happens in this game.
Rod, what we've talked about all the teams that are sort of in the mix. Calgary's still there, but I mean, what do you make of the Stamps? And are they playing for their season this week? I could make an argument if they lose this game to Edmonton, I don't see much of a path for them to be a playoff team.
I agree. And I wonder, I wonder about quarterback play. As much as I like Jake Mayer and his big play capability, but consistency I wonder about. They've kind of just sort of flown under the radar in a bad way, kind of failing. Like Edmonton through worse and now better, I mean, seemed to be more apparent with big plays, everything else than Calgary was. And it's finally coming to fruition for the Elks. They're the team on the rise. The Stampeders stalling out, and they've had a long break before playing on Labor Day. What was it, 17 days? I think it was between the Ottawa game, which they lost on the final play, and then this loss, an impressive win by the Edmonton Elks. And so they get the rematch. I'll be in Edmonton for that game. I'll be curious to see how different the Stampeders look, especially against an Edmonton team that is just really coming on. And, you're talking about Winnipeg, BC, Saskatchewan, and Edmonton. And if those teams all, keep going the way they're projecting right now, that's bad news for the Stampeders, no question, especially if they're going to lose back-to-back games to the Edmonton Elks.
Rod, it's been so much fun having you on the program. Listen, just before we go, I saw a couple folks in the chat mentioning Darren Detition, and I always think of Dutch around Labor Day and the Banjo Bowl. He was such a proud Saskatchewan guy, and was quite often the life of Grey Cup week. It's been a while since he passed, but I know he's still in the hearts of everyone at TSN. Yeah. Do you have those same feelings when you look at the green and these big days and the big parties around these 2 weeks here on the prairies and think about our old pal Dutch?
No kidding. No question, rather. Being out there in Regina, there's nothing. People were really kind to coming up to me, coming up to others working at TSN, especially in Saskatchewan, just how sorry that they are and were to find out about Dutch and that he's gone. But I have fond memories, several of working back in the old sports desk days with him. But then I worked a lot of Grey Cups with him. We used to do a show called Grey Cup Saturday and Grey Cup Sunday, which is all day television after we've been out till late at night, strictly for research purposes, sampling the Grey Cup parties and everything else.
Yes.
So we'd have only because we'd have something to talk about the next day, of course. I mean, it was, and he was so much fun, and he kept things light for all of us. He certainly did for me. I mean, I think of all the times that he made me laugh, and I thought it was, he'd been going through a hard time. He missed an entire year in 2021, and he came back and started working again in the fall around Labor Day of 22, and he got a chance to host our Grey Cup coverage in Saskatchewan. I'll never forget that. I felt so good for him. I felt good for all of us to see him back there in his home province and up there in the podium and the presentation and everything else. And, in light of how things went after that, I'll never forget that moment. And we all miss him, but it was, I was really appreciative to see that he could come back and work that game.
No, he was synonymous with the Canadian Football League, TSN, and the province of Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
I think back, what was the last time? Was it 2013 when it was in Regina, the previous time?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll never forget the crowd around him and Hedge in and around the stadium before the game. And, at this point, we'd finished doing the shows all week. I mean, I was going in just as a fan with a bunch of friends to take in the Grey Cup. And I mean, you want to talk about a guy holding court, but loving every second of it and having enough time for everyone. And Hedge tells stories too about just, being around with Dutch, but you couldn't get him out of there because he was truly the man of the people. Anyways, we missed him on the weekend. We will again for the Banjo Bowl this week and certainly a Grey Cup. But Rod, thanks so much for doing this. It was a hell of a weekend, and I have a feeling these two teams are going to put on another classic in the Banjo Bowl on Saturday afternoon on CTV.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Dusty's going to have the call of that one with Glenn Suter, and I'll be watching. It's amazing how that's become just about as big as the Labor Day, classic as well. I mean, and that stadium is, in Winnipeg is just so much fun to do a game at, and it'll be a great atmosphere, I'm sure.
Well, the best move they ever made a few years ago. They moved that game to Saturday, not going head-to-head with the first week of NFL.
Yeah.
And I mean, now Rider fans, they don't have the long weekend, but at least with the game being on Saturday, they've got the day to get back and get their life back together before having to punch the clock on Monday. So it continues to get bigger. The game's been sold out for about a month.
Oh, yeah.
So, it is so great to see. I mean, the crowd that we had here in Winnipeg against Hamilton, there wasn't a ticket to be had. It was the same situation in Regina last weekend, and it's going to be the same case on Saturday. So,
I was going to say, Hustler, I had a good chat with Wade Miller the night before, so last Saturday night, the night before the Labor Day game, and I said to him, and I'm talking about the Banjo Bowl, looking forward to that too, and I said it's just about as big as the Labor Day game, and he looked at me like just about. He goes, "It's bigger." So I mean, just the whole competitive side, the Saskatchewan versus Winnipeg and Riders Bombers. I mean, it's awesome, but it is huge. I mean, it's so whether it's actually bigger. I mean, the attendance, everything else. It's two great places to watch a football game, and it's just a classic rivalry.
Rod, you be well. Thanks so much. Continued great
work.
Great
chatting always, Hustler.
Hey, listen, we appreciate the time. Maybe we can do this later on this season. All the best to you and the gang.
I still remember that. I think the first time I met you and chatted with you years ago with Lawless. It was always a good time.
No doubt about it. And we'll see you in Vancouver as well. Cannot wait for that. Take care, Rod.
Take care. Bye-bye.
There's Rod Smith from TSN. He had the call for the big win on Sunday, and now it'll be Dusty coming in along with Glenn Suter to the game on CTV. And again, it's a 2:00 start. Party gets going around noon at the Princess Auto tailgate party. One thing I know we'll see a lot of in the parking lot before the game is some of Winnipeg's favorite local beer, Little Brown Jug. I know my pal Pat Rathwell had his fair share of generics on the bus and in the tailgate beforehand. We did bring out quite a bit of generic. And one of the great parts of generic is right now you can pop into your local beer store. The 8 packs of Tall Boys, $19.99. Now, they had that great special with the 12-pack of generic and the 12-pack of 1919 heading into the long weekend. But that is now the everyday price of generic lager. Impressively standard, as only Little Brown Jug can make it. Pick it up downtown. Check out their patio while you're there, 334 William Avenue. Your local Manitoba liquor marts, and your favorite local beer store. Well, tomorrow, gang, is NFL kickoff. Friday, we got an NFL game. Saturday, we've got the Banjo Bowl. Sunday, the full slate of NFL games. Whether you need to get your blue for the Banjo Bowl, or whether you want to get the latest merch of your favorite team for NFL kickoff, Royal Sports has you covered. It is all there right now. And all the new turf traditions, Bomber gear is in. Looked amazing. Saw a lot of that out in Regina on the weekend. And, of course, the biggest and best NFL selection in town. Get down there and get ready for another huge weekend of football and the upcoming season of NFL. And while you're at it, for all you hockey players, take care of everything you need to drop the puck on another season, as Royal Sports is the hockey superstore in town for over 40 years with the biggest and best selection of everything you need for a great season ahead. Pop by and see them, 750 Pembina Highway. Follow them on Insta at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. And don't forget, not this weekend, but the following weekend will be another world-famous Royal Sports tent sale. And the wait is over tomorrow, folks. We're back at Boston Pizzas, getting together with the gang for primetime NFL games. Nothing better than saddling up, having a few ice-cold schooners, some world-famous BP wings, and, of course, those gourmet pizzas. Watching the NFL and winning great prizes. Make Boston Pizza your headquarters with your crew for every NFL primetime game all year. And if you are staying at home, you can order online at bostonpizza.com. Remo, great stuff with Rod Smith. Man, he was awesome.
Yeah, great talking with Rod. What a great voice. And finishing off with some nice memories of Darren Detition. Hard not to think about him when, they're on Saskatchewan for Labor Day, mentioning, him being able to broadcast at the Grey Cup there. And, I tweeted this when he passed, but my favorite TSN promo ever was the Rodski and Dutch commercial. It is on YouTube, just a Sports Center. Grew up watching them. So, great talk with Rod. Big week for CFL. Looking forward to that. And I know we have Nic Demski coming up and had the huge touchdown on Sunday. And I think really quieted down has a lot of the conversation about him we were having earlier in the season. He had some, unfortunate fumbles. I mean, in the Bombers fumbling, we haven't even talked about that. When they were losing, they were saying, "Hey, hold on to the ball." And I think that was something that was certainly easily correctable. I think the interceptions, you'd like to see that come down. Zach, what did he had one and the touchdown on the weekend. So some challenges going forward. But yeah, great overview of the league there.
Yeah, well, and that's a nice little lead in because a number of those topics Jeff and I will be hitting on CFL 110, which is going to start about 3:15 after we finish up with Nic Demski. Listen, while we wait for Nick to jump in a few minutes, let's get over to the Coolbet Lines right now. And of course, we've got and this is just a perfect example of how tight the CFL has been all season long. Every line this week is 3 points or less. The Alouettes are 3-point favorites in that huge game against BC. Ottawa, -1.5 against Toronto. The rematch, Bombers-Riders. The Riders were 2.5-point faves last week. The Bombers are 2.5-point faves this week. And the same 2.5 number being hung on the Elks right now against the Calgary Stampeders. Don't forget, every week, cool bettors get to choose one CFL bet for a 20% win boost. Pat myself on the back, and I had the BC Winnipeg Edmonton moneyline parlay with that boost, which was nice. Put about an extra $30 on the ticket, which I appreciated, just in time for NFL season. And listen, we'll touch on a couple more NFL lines later on, but don't forget, if you've been playing at Coolbet for a long time or a short time, but you've already taken advantage of using the WST promo for a 100% bonus on your first deposit. Special promo heading into NFL season. The NFL reload bonus. If you bet $50, you will get 100% bonus up to $50. If you deposit up to $50, they'll match that up to $50. Go to the promotions code, click on the bear in the jersey. You put in NFLRL24 to take advantage of that 100% reload bonus up to $50 over at Coolbet. Join us in the lock shop tomorrow. All of our CFL picks, and then the big one on Friday, our first NFL Best Bets show of the season. Again, that's daily at noon before Winnipeg Sports Talk over at Edmonton Sports Talk channel. All right, CFL 110 coming up at 3:15. But right now, let's welcome in Nic Demski from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, coming off that big win in Regina on the weekend. Nick, what's up, buddy? How are you?
Not bad. How about you? How you doing?
Well, I'm good. I mean, I, like many Bomber fans, came back feeling like I played the game on Monday. It was a hell of a weekend. I mean, it was great to see so many Bomber fans out there. I mean, like just the atmosphere of the entire city for the weekend really felt like we were back. You played in this game on both sides for a number of years. How did that one compare to you just looking around? I mean, there wasn't a seat to be had, a ton of blue. It seemed like the atmosphere was as good as I can remember for one of these games in a long, long time.
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, yeah, it was loud, bunch of energy on both sides. Of course, there's a lot of green in the stands, but at the same time, there's definitely some blue there too. So, I mean, it's just amazing that our fan base is willing to travel and bring the energy out for those games. I mean, it definitely helped us. I mean, it was funny because even that last field goal that they had when they had a chance to win, I mean, the stadium was still making a bunch of noise. It wasn't like it was quiet or anything like that. Like they weren't letting Lauder think about it for 2 seconds. So, I mean, it's just amazing, how much support we get.
Well, I mean, let's talk about, the game you had and the offense in particular. And, I mean, listen, I think, when you look at how well these defenses have been playing all year long and looked at the history of this game, I think a lot of people thought that this was going to be another one of these, first team to hit 20 points sort of wins. I mean, the under, very close, very tight. And listen, it was close and tight, but in a very different way. Like the offense, the passing game really struggled in the Hamilton game until that clutch drive at the end to win. It looked completely different against Saskatchewan. I mean, tell us about the preparation for that game and making the strides that you guys did as an offense with Zach in the first half.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we had a good game plan, and we stuck to it and stuck to our process, and we're executing. That's the main thing. It's kind of tricky with the coaching that was moving around over there in Hamilton. So it was kind of a weird prep week in a sense. But we already played SAS once. Corey Mace has been around the league for a while, so we kind of knew what type of defense they wanted to bring against us. So, we did a good job preparing for that and making our corrections. There's still some stuff that we need to fix. I think we still need to, make sure our run game's at a better pace. But you know what, at the end of the day, we scored enough points and made enough happen to get the win.
Well, I mean, tell us about what the prep was like last week, because, again, I mean, there were plenty of times in particularly the second half against Hamilton where it just didn't seem like things were clicking. But, I mean, listen, pro sports is what have you done for me lately business. Yeah. What you guys did at the end of the game was rally around Zach and have him lead you the distance for a game-winning touchdown in the final 30 seconds. How much did that win and the way you won help you guys prepare and carry some of that offensive momentum into the first half?
Yeah, I mean, one of our mantras on offense, is just do whatever it takes to win. Do whatever it takes to have one more point than the other team. We don't care how it gets done. We just want to go out there and make sure we can win it for this team. So, for us, it was kind of the same thing in Saskatchewan. We always know it's going to be, a dogfight out there against them. So, we definitely had to prepare. And probably the biggest thing that we had to prepare for was that crowd noise, just hearing that, the game was sold out and whatnot. So, it's always hard to go into opponent's spot, as hostile as Saskatchewan is when you can't really hear. Zach couldn't even do his cadence like that. So, we just had to rally around him. He's a great leader. And then when Strev came in, we just had to rally around Strev and just make sure that we can move the chains and put Serge in a good enough position to kick a field goal.
You mentioned about rallying around. I mean, what was it like at halftime? I mean, after that hit, which I think most people would agree was a little cheap, and now you find out that the guy has had such a great first half that's led you to this lead, all of a sudden isn't going to be able to play.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? It was a tough one. Nobody really knew kind of what was going on because Zach, he's such a competitor. He wasn't ruling himself out yet at halftime. So, kind of when you get that news, I mean, obviously you have a guy like Strevler who's a competitor and a warrior and is ready whenever his name gets called. So, we knew that we could go out there and handle business with him. So, when Zach kind of, dropped the bomb or, came out there without his shoulder pads on, we kind of all got the, we all knew that he wasn't going to be able to finish this game. So at the end of the day, I mean, it's football. It's a next man up mentality, and whoever you got out there wearing the jersey at the time, that's who you got to play for and play with. So, we made it work.
I got to ask you, because just from afar, Zach and Strevler seem like such different dudes. I mean, like Collaros is so quiet, very focused. And then Strevler is this ball of energy. I mean, from a receiver standpoint, just how different is it in the huddle with a guy like Zach, who's been around for so long, and then Strevler getting his opportunity coming in? I imagine trying to blow guys up, take the ball himself, and throw it all at the same time.
Yeah, he would if he could. But Strev, I mean, you know what, he. You definitely have seen a lot of growth in him though since he's been back from down south. So. He's a leader too, you know what I mean? And it's funny that you say, they are, two different guys, but at the end of the day, they lead in their own way and everybody in the room respects it. Obviously Zach, his respect, just what he does on the field. I mean, that just speaks for itself. But Strev, he's the type of guy that he's gonna come in here, he's gonna work hard, he's gonna be gritty, and he's gonna earn that respect and demand that respect. And you know what, like everybody rallies behind him. Obviously we know it's a little bit of a different style, but at the end of the day, I mean, Strev does the work in order what it takes to win. So, we all rally behind him, and we just got to go out there and execute the game plan for whatever it is with whatever quarterback we have.
And we're guilty of this. I mean, fans and in the media, we live in kind of a fantasy football world. So we're always talking about what the offensive numbers are. And, you're looking at the guys on defense that make big plays. But in 3-down football, special teams is a huge part of the game that often gets undersold, but is the difference more often than not between winning and losing. Just a quick word on the confidence that you guys have every time Papi or Sergio Castillo gets thrown out there. I mean, a 52 and a 56-yarder. And we can't forget about probably the play of the game. The punt by Jamison Sheehan, which caught them completely off guard. That ended up in a touchdown. I mean, both Jam and Sergio had their fingerprints all over that victory. For sure.
And I mean, they've been doing it all year. Obviously, like any player, like any piece of football, it's always going to be some waves. There's always going to be some ups and downs. But I mean, Serge, he's been having an incredible year. Jamison's been doing a great job too. Our whole special teams unit has been doing good. Obviously there's always going to be things that you can improve on, but at the end of the day, I mean, they're doing what they have to do. I mean, that Nick Hallett play was unbelievable. I mean, there's probably a lucky charm up his butt somewhere or something like that. But at the end of the day, when the bounces are there and you work hard and you pursue to the ball, I mean, good things are going to happen. And, that's Nick Hallett for you right there. Nick brings that type of attitude every day, just working hard and just being, a savvy football player. And, it showed on that play alone. So, obviously it was a great punt by Jammer. But, Serge, I mean, Serge is just such a funny character, but he really is serious about his craft. He takes this thing, takes football very seriously, and I'm just so proud of him for how far he's come and what he's done for this team.
Well, I mean, listen, he's setting records right now. I mean, we're only 2/3 through the season. He's already set a CFL record for the amount of 50+ yard field goals this year. He's now at 9. He had 2 last week, and I mean, you can just tell. I mean, O'Shea, being a special teams coach background, I mean, knows the importance of field position and knows what happens when, you miss these long field goals. There is no hesitation whatsoever to throw him out, whether it's 52, 55, or even 60 yards, and he seems to get the job done. And that is a huge boost, and it's got to give a real level of confidence in everybody on that sideline when you're seeing the kick team roll out.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you know what? Obviously, we're having a little bit of difficulty moving the ball the way that we wanted to. Of course, we did enough, but at the end of the day, when you kind of know that, I mean, specifically Lucky, gets a big punt return. And then, I think I picked up a first down. I think we ran out the clock a little bit more, and then we put him in field goal situation so like when that you can cross the 55 and that you have a shot of getting 3 points out of something like that. I mean, it takes a lot of pressure off the offense, especially in close games like that. So, we just appreciate him. I know he appreciates us too, but it's just that's just the family part of football. Everybody's playing for each other and trying to put each other in better situations. And we still got to do a better job on offense, but it definitely is helps a lot when we have a kicker at that caliber.
Well, listen, it's been all hands on deck. I mean, the 0-4 and 2-6 was sort of an ugly start, but I mean, not only have you guys done the job, but everything else is broken your way, and now what seemed like a laughable scenario is reality, that you're first place and hold the rest of your destiny in your own hands. Of course, you got to keep winning, though, and this is a huge game against Saskatchewan on Saturday. Nick, these home and homes, maybe you could speak to just the challenge of a player going up against the same team. I mean, I think historically, if you go through these numbers, it's difficult to beat a team twice in a row.
Sir.
You've got the opportunity to do that, and you just did it earlier this season against a very good BC Lions team. I mean, what is it going to take for you guys to get the job done and get this win on Sunday or Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, I mean, we have a bye week after this week, so I think we just got to let it all hang out, man. We just got to go out there play fearless, play physical, play tough. And, but at the end of the day, we just got to play smart. We got to play our type of football, our brand of football. Offensively, we got to stay on the field. Defensively, obviously they got to get them off the field. And special teams, they just got to keep doing what they're doing. It's a lot easier said than done, but at the end of the day, we're playing good football, so we just can't take the pedal off the metal, pedal off the metal. There we go. I was trying to look for the words there, but we just got to keep doing what we're doing and just play our fundamental football. It's we're in a great spot to do something great. Heading into the bye, so we just got to go out there and stick to our process and just get it done.
Well, that process, of course, kind of started in earnest today. You were back on the practice field. How did practice go today, and how good was it to see 8 back practicing with the ones?
Of course. You know what? Just seeing Zach, I had a feeling he was going to, be able to go this week. You just never know when it's when something like that happens. But I know he's a competitor. I know he wants to be out there, and everybody wants him out there. So, practice was good. We were moving in the right direction. So, again, we just got to clean some stuff up. But I think we'll be ready to go when it comes time comes Saturday.
It's Rider Week back in the Peg. Banjo Bowl on Saturday. It doesn't get any better than this. And listen, the atmosphere and the scene in Regina all weekend was incredible. I think we're in for a hell of a round 2 between these two football teams. And it was a heck of a game last week.
Month and a half.
Yeah, I have a hard time thinking it'll be any different. Hey, just on the way out, that it's going to be insanity in that stadium on Saturday afternoon. But man, just a thought on the support you guys have had from the fans all season long. Even with, the tough start, they've been calling out. And I think about that Hamilton game, which didn't have a seat available in the entire house, and the crowd and the way they stood up there at the end of the game. It's a special time for Winnipeg football fans, and I imagine it's got to be, especially for you being a local guy, a special time to be a Blue Bomber.
Oh, for sure. You know what? It is amazing. Obviously, you don't like to talk about the past years. You want to be stuck in the present, but it has been a blessing to be part of this. About what we've been doing. So the fans is incredible. The support's incredible. I know they're going to bring that energy, and it's Banjo Bowl. So I know everybody has this game circled on the calendar. As I was just saying, I think it's been sold out for the last 6 weeks. So it's going to be amazing. And it's funny. All the vets are just telling the rookies, just stay composed. It's going to be an emotional game with that crowd in the background. But I think Labor Day they got their taste of what these games can be like. But this is the game to be at. So we can't wait to get this thing going.
One more thing on the way out, and I know for a fact that O'Shea would never ever bring this up. But are you and the guys aware that if you guys are able to get the win on Saturday, in the greatest scenario possible in the Banjo Bowl against your biggest rival, Mike O'Shea will become the winningest head coach in Blue Bomber history with 103 wins?
I never knew that. No, yeah, and that's the thing. That just goes to show how humble he really is. Because I've never heard of that. I know he's done some amazing things this year already with the type of wins and whatnot like that. But yeah, I never knew that. So
it was 100 earlier this year, and we've been mentioning a little bit how perfect of a scenario would that be? But listen, you had to beat Hamilton, and it was a tough challenge on the road, but we're here right now. So I know he's probably the one giving out the game balls afterwards, but hopefully you guys can get the dub and maybe give him a game ball for 103, passing the legendary Bud Grant with this next win as Blue Bombers head coach. Nick, good luck on the weekend. Congratulations on the great run as of late, back in first place. Keep it rolling, and we'll look forward to a hell of a scene on Saturday afternoon as you guys look to continue being on top of the CFL West.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you having me, man. Have a good day.
Take it easy. We'll see you soon. There's Nic Demski of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Big thanks to DC and the gang for setting that up. More CFL talk coming up in about 10 minutes with CFL 110, along with my friend Jeff Hamilton. Let's get to the why not question of the day. And it is simply this. As close as that game was, and as difficult as it is to beat a team twice, do the Bombers get it done? win the season series against Saskatchewan and win the Banjo Bowl? How are you feeling right now? 2.5-point spread. I do think this is going to be a very, very difficult game, a very tough challenge for the Bombers. I think that they can do it. Interested in your thoughts on the why not question of the day for Not Autocorp over at Waverly and McGillivray. Goldeyes added tonight. You can follow along in the American Association. Game 1 in Sioux Falls, travel day tomorrow, and then back for Friday night at Blue Cross Park. We're going to head out to the game, support the Fish, and should be a hell of a night for a little bit of baseball and a great sports weekend heading into the Banjo Bowl. And then, of course, Sunday and the National Football League. Big thanks to the Goldeyes for their support of WST. And no real golf to talk about today, but I will shout out our friends at Breezy Bend. Yesterday on our Breezy Bend Golf Report, we got talking about the international and the American teams for the President's Cup in Montreal. Had a lot of chats with some pals that are going to be out there. Cannot wait to get to Montreal. It's going to be a huge, huge event, and the biggest event, I believe, ever in the history of Canadian golf at Royal Montreal. So we'll stay on top of that. We'll have reports from Montreal. As always, brought to you by Breezy Bend. Find out more on membership for the 2025 season at breezybend.ca, or by giving a call to the clubhouse and asking for our pal, Corey Johnson. All right, I did want to quickly get back to the Coolbet Lines. I mentioned to you all that there is a special reload bonus. So if you've been playing at Coolbet, you were thinking on topping it up for the upcoming NFL season, 100% bonus up to $50. The promo code, go into promotions and click on it. You'll want to use NFLRL24. So you can do that before kickoff tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, we'll get into Chiefs-Ravens. There's tons of NFL futures out today. Today, on the Lock Shop, we kind of went into the make the playoffs numbers. And I was just looking for some value on some teams. I'm still wondering, hey, who's going to be the good team last year that doesn't make the playoffs this year? I made the case for the Philadelphia Eagles today at plus 200. They're in action in Brazil against the Packers to start things off. I'm not high on Nick Sirianni. They've got 2 new coordinators. I have a feeling the Eagles could be taking a real step back, and I think the NFC overall is getting a little bit better. If you want a couple teams at plus money to make the playoffs, I do like the Jags at plus 135. I'll tell you what, I think the Seahawks at plus 175 are also a pretty live bet. But you can bet every team in the NFL to make or miss the playoffs. We've got all the division winners. A couple of my favorite division winners are, Chiefs obviously, but they're such a heavy favorite. I'm not sure it's worth betting at minus 103. I do like the New York Jets in the AFC East. And wow, the odds have really swung. Miami's now plus 230, the Bills at plus 175, and the Jets are the favorite at plus 150 in the AFC East. The other one I really like is Green Bay at plus 190. But before kickoff tomorrow, get in, get your NFL futures bets set, and you can follow those along all year long as we get it all going tomorrow night at Arrowhead. By the way, Remis, speaking of Arrowhead, did you hear that Chiefsaholic, the bank-robbing Chiefs superfan, is being sentenced tomorrow in a Kansas City courtroom just hours before the Chiefs raise a banner and kick off another season?
I only heard about it because I saw your tweet yesterday.
Yeah, he's getting sentenced tomorrow. I, tongue-in-cheek, said it'd be nice if they could just push it off to Friday, let him throw the wolf suit on one more time, bang the drum at Arrowhead, and then go to jail. The funny thing is, prosecution's asking for 20 years. His lawyers are asking for 10 years. You know they're going to meet in the middle and give him 15 years, the number of Patrick Mahomes.
Oh my God.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. But yes, no, Chiefsaholic won't be there. I think Rob Riggle's banging the drum tomorrow for the big game to start it off. Hey, listen, before we wrap it up, how did you do last night? I had one win.
At the track?
Of 17, yeah.
No, really bad. I didn't have any winners.
Okay, so I chipped away a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's quickly roll through. Our picks for tonight. I've got to pick 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
All right. Hey, shout out to Mitch in chat, who did a great job filling in for me. Us just gifted 20 memberships.
Mitch,
20 new users with a microphone in the chat. That's awesome.
listen. Oh, that's Derpazen is Mitch. Listen, I wasn't aware. I didn't. But now there's a lot of things that are now making sense from last week. Now that I know that Mitch is Derpazen.
Yeah.
Huge thanks to Mitch for amazing work last night. He and Adam really helped us out big time and got us through all week long. And of course, you can see their handiwork on the ASD broadcast on YouTube each and every night. All right, so let's roll through this. Remo, you got anything on race 2?
I am on race. No, I have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 today.
Okay, race 2, I've got just a straight up 1, 2 exacta box. JL Cooper and Daddy's Rare Edition. What do you have for number 3?
I'm keeping it simple. This race, Huss. Just winners. Race 3, $5 on number 4, Dynamic Strike to win. That is the big favorite.
All right, we're going head to head. I'm going $4 or $3 on number 5. What is it? Game the Torpedoes?
Damn the Torpedoes.
Damn the
Must be
Torpedoes.
Tom Petty fan.
There we go. Damn the Torpedoes. Now into race number 4. This is not a triactor box. This is just a straight triactor bet. 3, 1, 5. No. Wait a second. I screwed that up. I think it's 3, 4, 1. Yes, 3, 4, 1. That's the $2 triactor on 3, 4, 1.
Okay, I have a 3, 1 exacta box on this.
Excellent. All right. Race number 5. Prairie Drifter to win, number 5. So 5 in race 5.
All right, I'm going. You're taking a longer shot. I'm going with the favorite, Paterson Equus, to win. Horse 3.
Okay, race 6. Here's my tractor box for the night. It's 1, 5, 7. Westover, Bossy Holiday, and Ride 'em, the favorite.
I'm going with Mr. Dazzle. Not quite the favorite, just behind to win.
Yeah, and then I got a toonie left for race 7. I'm going to throw it on a bit of a longer shot. Number 6, Golden Eyed to win. Number 6.
All right, I got a longer shot of toonie on Finalize, horse 1 to win.
Perfect. All right, there are picks. Of course, you can bet along hpibet.com if you like. And you can watch all the races at Assiniboia Downs. But the best place to watch them is at the track, post time, 7:30 p.m. And again, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday racing right through September up until September 24th. All right, that is going to do it for us. But don't go anywhere if you're with us on YouTube, because we're kicking over right away to CFL 110. Jeff Hamilton is ready to roll, and we've got so much to talk about coming out of Labor Day weekend, heading into the Banjo Bowl. We'll do that next, brought to you by Garage Living Winnipeg. Thanks again to all the sponsors that make the show happen every day. Everyone in chat, great crowd today as always, and of course, all of you listening on the podcast. We appreciate you. Join us tomorrow. Big NFL kickoff edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk beginning at 1 p.m. In the meantime, stick around and join us right now live on the WST YouTube channel for CFL 110 next.
Oh my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite